Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the worst disorders and diseases in human history, from leprosy to exploding head syndrome, and even the worst disease in human history. Number 9. Rabies. This disease is caught from bats, raccoons, or even dogs, with most of the people getting this disease actually being animal control. Since they interact with extremely rabid and vicious dogs all the time, come here. But it's not that they wouldn't notice that the dog was infected and actively foaming from the mouth, but that they would have to take them anyway and risk getting bit, because obviously a dog can't just be running around acting vicious without somebody having to take the risk to try to get them. Now, animal control can use various methods to protect themselves, but alas, sometimes they do get bit. Youch! And this will cause them to be infected with rabies. With this disease being even worse, since you can't tell whether you have it or not, since it takes days or even weeks to actually show any symptoms. And when it does, it's usually flu-like symptoms and maybe some tingling at the site that you got bit, but really nothing much, until it fully takes over, traveling fast up to your brain, causing extreme agitation, making you drool a lot, have muscle spasms, and even possibly paralysis. But one of the most interesting symptoms is the fact that you are extremely scared of water. And yes, I'm being completely serious. If you were to try to give a person who has a rabies infection water, they would immediately slap it out of your hand and would start choking on it if you decided to pour it down their mouth, or even if they chose themselves to try to swallow it. Their body literally would not allow them to. And shortly after this, they would slip into a coma and pass away. Which is the reason why this disease is almost always fatal, with there only being around 15 cases of people who actually survived this horrible disease. Number 8. Cotards Syndrome. With this being one of the worst disorders on the list, this actually involves a person believing that they are dead or do not exist. Also associated with severe depression and schizophrenia, this is usually caused from a near life or death experience in which the person barely survives, and therefore is sometimes left with the thought that they might have actually not survived and they're currently dead. Therefore, they stop taking care of themselves by not eating, not sleeping, or pretty much doing anything. Sometimes even trying to get themselves buried. These individuals cannot even be convinced that they are alive by doctors because they will just excuse it off, saying that they are currently dead. There was a case with a 53-year-old woman who actually described herself as smelling of rotten flesh and wanted to be taken to the morgue so that she could be with the dead people because she thought that she was dead. Later, she was actually given treatment, but the fact that this happened in the first place is pretty bizarre. Number 7. Pica. This disorder has been heavily sensationalized in certain movies and TV shows, all because it has to do with eating things that should not be going in your body. And pretty much all public school kids know the guy who used to eat glue or just take a bite of their homework. This disease, however, is mostly done because of sensory issues, with them liking the feel or sensation of the object in their mouth, despite it obviously not being food. But this does not stop there, with more severe cases involving people eating screws, bolts, or pins that could severely damage their insides, traveling down their throat and scratching every part of their stomach all the way down to the end. And as a person who can barely eat Doritos because of how sharp they are going down, this is especially horrifying to me, with most cases of death actually being from lead poisoning from eating paint after scratching it off the wall. Number 6. Lycanthropy Syndrome. This syndrome involves people who think they're transforming into some type of animal. This is typically a wolf or a fox or some type of other predator. One such case involved a man who thought he was changing into a werewolf, which honestly sounds pretty funny, but this guy was actually admitted into a insane asylum because of his delusions. And during his stay, he was actually complaining of having wolf feet that he could not properly walk on, having a body covered in hair, which he obviously didn't, and actually had a case where he refused to eat any sort of food other than raw meat. But when he was given this raw meat to eat, he actually declined, saying that it was not rotten enough and that it needed to be more smelly. Gross. Number 5. Exploding head syndrome. Despite its name, it actually does not involve heads exploding, and instead is an extreme sleep disorder. It often occurs after having little to no sleep or being under lots of stress and anxiety. And it involves every single time you try to go to sleep, you being suddenly awoken by a loud exploding sound that obviously is not really there, but wakes you up from your sleep and causes you to not be able to go back to sleep. Otherwise, you'll start hearing explosions and screaming screaming, and various other sounds. This can lead people to stay up for days and eventually die from it. But most of the time, it's less severe, with it only happening a couple times before it stops. Either way though, it sounds horrifying just having a random explosion happen every single time you're just about to fall asleep, or already inside of deep sleep when you're not at all expecting it. Number 4, cold allergy. It's no doubt that some people enjoy the cold and some people enjoy it when maybe it's a little hotter. Me personally, if it's above 90 degrees, I don't even plan on going outside unless it's to the beach. But for some people, they can only handle 75 degrees or higher because they have an actual allergy to the cold. This can also include items that are cold, such as ice cubes in their drink, which they cannot handle at all. And if they do, it'll result in hives, difficulty breathing, lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and everything in between, possibly leading to death. One of these situations turned life-threatening when a man, after leaving a hot shower, actually passed out and almost died because of going into the cooler air. He was discovered with a massive amount of hives on him and struggling to breathe. Number 3, the Black Death. This was extremely prevalent in Europe in the 14th century and was caught from being bitten by fleas or rodents. The victim would immediately experience fever, chills, and a rapid heartbeat, then leading into more severe symptoms like abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, and even organ failure. And some strains even had people coughing up blood, which is obviously a horrible thing considering how it was easily transmissible and quickly spread across all of Europe, with the name coming from people who actually had darkened skin from the infection. Number 2, leprosy. You may have heard of this disease from any type of Bible verse or maybe even Sid the Sloth, but what you may not know is that this disease actually affects over 200,000 people a year. Usually caught from another person or from a wild animal such as an armadillo, this disease is definitely one of the most disturbing to have physically. Beginning with loss of feeling and a sort of tingling sensation with having pale patches on the skin, it truly sets you in for a horrific ride, because this transitions into thickening of the skin, losing your eyebrows or eyelashes, your nose flattening, and even partial blindness. However, it gets even worse, slowly developing into massive lesions on the skin and extreme bruising. These wounds will be slow to heal and possibly get infected, appearing all over the hands and feet in the most painful places. This then leads to infection and eventual death. Number 1, Morgellons Disease. You may have been wearing something extremely uncomfortable and had been tuggy on your skin, but did you know that people actually experiencing this syndrome think that there's actually bugs underneath their skin, and therefore they pick at their skin viciously, developing massive lesions, and sometimes even rip all their hair out, scratching their skin until it bleeds. This is obviously a really horrible disorder, as it's really hard to talk these people out of scratching themselves, which can possibly lead to infection and eventual death. Caused by psychological problems like stress, this syndrome can truly be deadly. You thought that was good? Well, this one's even better. Don't believe me? Watch it. And while you're at it, like and subscribe.